Jada has been telling me since she was about 3 years old that she was glad she picked me as her mother. She talked about picking her father, picking me. This is something she's been doing since she's been able to speak. There's that feeling of awe and excitement, and then you're kind of like, ooh, okay, that's not something you hear every day. Jada talks about having a memory of life between lives. As she describes it in her own words, it would be like watching a slideshow. And she remembered seeing who I would be, who her father would be, who her sister would be, and that she more or less handpicked us, and that we would be the people that would best serve her needs in her life as Jada. Kind of making me go, okay, you're quite aware of what you actually came here and chose. It wasn't just a random type of a statement. She would back it up with other things that made me begin to think, okay, she's really remembering a different time. She's remembering not being Jada. In our house, the girls each have their own rooms. Jada has never once slept in her own room, ever. She would always prefer to be with me. That generally shifts, down the line. But this was something very different. She just couldn't go to sleep on her own.
I'm Jada's sister Gemma, and I'm 12. Jada always slept with me or slept in my mom's bed. It's been that way for as long as I can remember. It bothers me that she comes into my room because I like to sleep like a starfish. It does worry me that she can't sleep alone because she should by this age, but she's still too scared.
It wasn't a fear of the dark. It wasn't one individual thing. It was just this whole idea of being left somewhere by herself. It's not a spoiled type thing. It's not a, oh, I just don't want to sleep in my own room kind of thing. There's something else there. I noticed that she had a very difficult time with being left on her own. Jada would always have me go upstairs to the bathroom with her. If I went upstairs to the bathroom, she would come with me. Unless she was deeply engrossed in a movie or a show with her sister sitting with her, I could slip out and maybe go downstairs and do laundry.
Jada told me often that she was afraid to be alone. Jada always and still does want my mom to be there.
The weird thing was, even though she doesn't like to be alone, Jada doesn't like crowds either. She'd go into a crowd, but she does not like crowds, and she's very vocal about not liking crowds either. Even in the schoolroom situation, she would have 25 students in her class, and for her, that's just way too many. She's gotten more accustomed to it, but she's still very cautious if left in a crowd, like say with her dance class. What time are you gonna be back? Are you coming back? She has another peculiar thing where she will say, do you see this turning out okay? Do you see me getting out of this situation? As a mom, you hate to see your child afraid of anything. I just didn't know how to help her.
James and I had a lot of problems getting pregnant. It took us 14 months to get pregnant, and then we lost the baby. We had to wait 2 months before we could start trying again, and then it took us another 10 months before we got pregnant with Eric. I was very happy when I got pregnant. I was very excited. Finally pregnant. Eric was born June 21st, 2006.
Eric was very adventurous. When he started crawling, you'd have to keep an eye on him because he'd be all over the place. He would speak complete sentences way ahead of his peers.
He had all of his milestones early. Started walking around 11 months, chattering very young, speaking small sentences shortly after he turned a year old. He was very healthy, very smart for his age. Eric was around 1.5 years the first time I ever heard him say that he had had a bad dream. Eric suffered from night terrors. From the time Eric was born, I never got a full night's sleep. I was exhausted, and he had had a bad dream. And he started to tell me about how he was in his castle up in the sky before he was Eric, and he met me and his dad up in the castle before we became mom and dad.
I remember what color my castle is. It was blue. Up in the sky on a big cloud.
And he would have conversations about the castle in the sky and how he was up there. He could look down and see everybody and how he picked his mommy and me.
He told me that he was really scared to leave his castle to come down and become Eric. And he said that it was because he was scared that's why he didn't come the first time. I immediately thought about the miscarriage. He was telling me that he was actually that baby that I had lost. All those years I had thought that I lost the baby, that I had an angel baby, this other child that I never got to hold. So for Eric to tell me about it, it was kind of a relief. I immediately was trying not to burst out into tears in front of him. It made me feel like I actually had the child I was supposed to have. I asked him how he got down here to become Eric, and Eric told me that he climbed down a ladder to become Eric. And I asked him how he knew it was time to leave his castle to become Eric. And he looked at me and he goes, well, duh, it was my birthday. As we approached Eric's third birthday, he was getting super excited about it and would ask me all the time to show him on the calendar when his birthday was. Eric's birthday is June 21st. I would tell Eric, this is your birthday, and point to June 21st. And he would say, no, that's my birthday, and point over to June 26th. He would argue that the 26th was his birthday, not the 21st.
That he was just irate that that was his birthday.
We didn't really know what was going on. Things were quiet for a little while, and then something else happened. Eric's middle name is Cole, and whenever he would say his full name, he would say Eric Coe. I thought he had trouble pronouncing the L, so I would try to pronounce it more clearly. It's Cole. And he said, no, it's Coe. It was my mommy's name. And I said, your mommy's name is Jennifer. And he goes, is that your name? And I said, well, yeah, I'm your mommy, aren't I? And he goes, no, you're my kid. That's my daughter's name. You're my daughter.
From the moment Elijah could speak, he talked about an older brother. I didn't really think much of it, but then he started saying other weird things. One time, Elijah and I were playing, and he just matter-of-factly turned to me and said, Mommy, my brother died in the army. He was shot. Up until that time, I had been reassuring him about his older brother in Senegal, but this was something else. This was something new.
I never have a son who just got killed, and I started just thinking about how he knows even about death at the time. It was just so scary and confusing.
He seemed to be concerned. And we would have to explain to him, honey, we don't know this brother you're talking about. Your brother that you have is in Senegal, and he's alive, and he's fine. And he would say, no. He wanted me to tell him what happened, but I had to explain to him, I don't know what happened. This was all before he started daycare. He wasn't watching anything other than these 2 kid shows that he was obsessed with, and that's all he ever watched. So it was scary to hear him say things like that, and I didn't know where he was picking it up, and who from, and I felt helpless.
I was in the army and I went to some wars. I don't know how a 2-year-old gonna be talking about war. And I never told him about me being in the army. I don't know where he really got it. He was mentioning people getting killed.
I just played it off and hoped that he would forget about it and change the subject. Between ages 2 and 4, he started with something else. And he just matter-of-factly said, well, you know, God makes us learn lessons in life. If we don't learn them, we have to go again. He has very intricate details about this whole process he says everyone goes through with God. We come from a mixed family, and I'm American, and my husband is Senegalese. His religion is Muslim, and so is mine. We have taught our children basic Muslim beliefs. What Elijah was saying, that we have to choose our families again and going through a process with God to see if we learned our lessons or not, and that determining that we go to live again or not, that's not part of the Muslim belief. I didn't know where this was coming from at all. It was just kind of shocking, like, wow, he's actually thinking about these deep concepts.
I want him to be a believer like me, believe in God, believe in life and death.
I started to wonder what was happening to my little boy. Things were quiet for a while, and then something else happened. Elijah started telling me about dreaming. It started to get a little more intense when he was older. He would scream in the middle of the night, and I would have to come in his room and console him. He would say that he dreamt about war.
He's gonna be talking about the killings and all those people coming to him. I'm trying to explain to him not to believe in whatever he's seeing. He's so scared. Sometimes even he's gonna get up in the middle of the night. He has to have the lights on all the time or the TV on all the time.
He would say that he dreamt about war, and he would still say things about his brother.
I just don't want him to believe in that, and I always explain to him, no, you don't have a brother, you are Elijah, you are my son. But sometimes he's just saying it like he know what he's saying.
All of the details that Elijah has been saying throughout the years have been consistent. They haven't changed at all. I started to wonder, is he remembering a past life?
My name's Annette. I live in Brooklyn, New York. I'm a writer and the author of a novel. Brooklyn is a wonderful place to raise a family because there are so many opportunities and so many places to see, so many things to do. There's lots of culture. There's a very low boredom factor here for children. So it's been a great experience raising the boys here. My boys are August and Hayward. Hayward is the firstborn. He's 22 and August is 17. When August was born, I was completely shocked. I thought that I was going to have a girl. And I remember just staring at him for several minutes because I just couldn't believe it. That was probably the only time in my life where I've ever been completely surprised by something. August, he was very quiet. He's a boy of few words because he sucked his thumb. And he wouldn't take his thumb out unless he had something important to say.
My name is Carlisle, and August is my son. August was always very affectionate, and I think the biggest thing that I always remember is that he was always very physical. He always threw the ball well. He was always very strong. We had him in a gymnastics class, and he was the only kid who could really hold himself up. He had that real strong intestinal strength. It's sort of like a warrior mentality. He has this very strong sense of honor, and he was always a very, very good and loyal friend.
One time, I was reading a story to him early one morning about a bird who falls out of his nest and doesn't know where his mother is. And he's not sure who his mother is. He goes around asking a bunch of animals, are you my mother? Are you my mother? I get to the end of the book where the little bird does find his mother, and he's very happy, and the mother is so glad he's safe. And he looks at me and he says, well, I know who my mother is. I know that you're my mother because I saw you from up above the clouds. I looked down at him and I said, really? You saw me from way above? He says, yeah, before I came here. So I said, well, how did you get to me then, if you saw me? He says, I had to jump. And I had to slide down on a string. And he says, it was a little scary, but I held on and I came all the way down to you. And I said, where? How did you get into me? And he says, well, I came through the top of your head, the crown of your head, all the way down. And he traced his little hand down to my stomach. And he didn't break his sentences at all. Like he didn't break his thought. The entire time that he told me, he says, I saw you. I can see everything. And I chose you.
My son Ryan had a very advanced vocabulary and was very mature. But every time we would drop him off at preschool, he would become hysterical. It was like he thought we were never going to see him again.
No parent wants to see their kids screaming and crying and being scared to be left in a classroom. I mean, that's just heartbreaking for anyone who has kids to know that their kid feels unsafe and scared. You don't ever want that.
I have this fearless child, and then all of a sudden, he is just clinging to me for dear life. I couldn't figure out why he was afraid, and it made me feel sad. We didn't know what to do. One day, he came to me with something totally unexpected. When Ryan had just turned 4, he looked up at me and said, "You're the best mommy I've ever had." And I said, "Ryan, I'm the only mommy you've ever had." And he says, "I had another mommy and daddy." And I said, "You did?" And he said, "Yeah, I picked you as my mommy." I said, "How did you pick me as your mommy?" He says, "I followed you." I said, "Where did you follow me?" He says, "I followed your footsteps in the snow." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. I was blown away because Ryan had never seen snow. We live in Vegas. However, I am from the East Coast. I'm from Pennsylvania, where we have bad winters. And I have spent plenty of time walking in the snow.
When Margie first told me what he had said and how he had found her going through the snow, that was pretty amazing to me. Little kids have fun making up stories and stuff. Being in preschool with a bunch of other little kids, you never know if he's coming up with stories along with their stories and embellishing what he's already heard and regurgitating the information to us. So at first, it's a little skepticism on my side for sure.
I'd never talked to Ryan about what happens to a person before they're born. I didn't know where this was coming from. Ryan does have a lot of empathy for people who are less fortunate, people with disabilities, or people that are bullied. When I asked Ryan what he wanted to be when he was older, he said that he wanted to be in the military. He also said that he wanted to be a police officer. The 2 jobs that Ryan expressed an interest in was more of a protecting people. That's what he wanted to do. He wanted to protect people. Ryan came to me and told me that he had a different mommy and daddy. When I asked him what happened to his mommy and daddy, he had told me that someone had come into his home and had shot his parents while they were in bed. He told me that his granny and his grandpa, and these are titles that we didn't use, granny was not a title that we used, took care of him. And they lived on a farm in a huge house, and they had 6 dogs, and the little dog used to ride in the back of the pickup truck. Ryan was telling me this story with no emotion. It was all just matter of fact. This is my story. This was my life. Ryan was so young, I couldn't understand where this was coming from. He didn't watch anything on television that was violent. We never exposed him to any violence. There was no one even in the family that ever talked about anything violent. When Ryan told me that his parents were shot in their bed, I said, "My goodness, that's a terrible story." I didn't know what else to say. I was speechless. Ryan even had a name for himself. He told me that his name was Ed Johnson. My mouth dropped. I had goosebumps. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. It sent chills up my spine. I didn't say anything. I didn't know what to say at that moment. I wondered why Ryan was very just nonchalant, matter of fact about the whole story. Such a violent story. I was amazed by my son's confidence while sharing this information. Ryan had so many details to his story, which made the story all the more real to me. I began to wonder if my son was remembering a past life.